Welcome to Politics as Usual at usualpolitics.com. I'm your host, Dr. McDuffy and Sinchen McDuffy. And we come to talk to you today about why you should vote. Okay? And Sinch, I know it's been crazy because I know sometimes we hear about people who say, "Oh, I'm not voting, it doesn't do anything, my vote doesn't count." So what are you hearing out there, and what do you suggest to those people?
I'm hearing a lot of the same stuff, about, they're not voting, the system is rigged anyway, even if they vote, that their vote doesn't count. And a lot of when I hear that, primarily, when I go into these barbershops or, hanging around just different groups. And unfortunately enough, a lot of that rhetoric, a lot of that talk comes from people who look like me. I'm in a particular age group, young black men, and a lot of that talk about not voting and the reasons why they're not voting it's disheartening to hear that. But again, we often hear that in our communities. Yeah. And and it's not us just hearing it. The statistics line up with that as well. When we talk about a lot of young black men not coming out to vote. And a lot of what we're hearing is, hey, well, it's not going to make a difference. The system is rigged. Then everybody wants to get into the whole electoral college argument. Hey, well, our vote doesn't matter. Electoral votes go differently. So again, it's primarily for me what I'm hearing, whether if it's professionally or even personally in my personal life. A lot of what I'm hearing is a lot of young black men who look like me, who are in the same age bracket as myself, are the ones who are generally speaking about not voting because it's a waste of time.
Okay, and it's interesting because in the 2016 election, it was primarily millennials, and a lot of them were young black males within that group. And I get it, man. Listen, this is not, I'm hearing the same thing from young black males as well in the barbershops and things of that nature. You hear, "Oh yeah, I'm not voting," and we're going to go through some reasons why you should vote. And listen, at the end of the day, right? You can say your vote doesn't count. The electoral college does take away from some of the votes. However, voting is highly important. Highly, highly, highly important. And if you don't vote, then you're going to have an issue. So reason number 1 and 2 kind of go together of why you should vote. Are you cool with potentially losing Medicare, Medicaid? And number 2, are you cool with losing potentially Social Security? And if Social Security and Medicaid, if we really look at it, right, and this is something that the Republican Party has loved over the years, and they've constantly wanted to get rid of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, right? These are things that came around not long after the Great Depression, and these social safety net programs are there, and we pay into those. We pay taxes. So I don't know why people love politicians that say, "Hey, we're going to get rid of Medicare, Medicaid, we're going to privatize it, we're going to do this." It's our money. It's the money that we put into it. So I always say, hey, if you're going to get rid of it, you need to give me my money back that I paid into it, because this is what I paid for. I didn't pay for you to privatize it. I didn't pay for you to get rid of it, So if you're cool, or are you cool with that? If you're not, then you may want to vote. And if you're cool with it, vote.
And I think one of the most egregious parts of the whole Medicaid discussion and the Medicaid, fight, you have politicians who refer to Medicaid and Medicare as an entitlement. This is not an entitlement of any kind. These are things that we pay into from the time you start working. You can look on your paycheck and it says, it's all your taxes, your Medicaid, your Medicares. These are things that we pay into from the time we start working. So again, for anybody to call this an entitlement and say, hey, you know what, they want to privatize it. And I don't think a lot of people quite understand what, privatizing Medicare and Medicaid is. Essentially, it's putting it on the stock market. And really, to break that down on the lowest level, it's almost like rolling dice with our Medicare and our Medicaid by putting it on the stock market and saying, hey, let's play this game and see which way it's going to go. If it's going to go up, the stock going to go down. That's not where I want to put my tax money. That's why it's important for me to vote. I'm not paying for politicians to roll dice with my Medicare and Medicaid. I mean, these are all programs that every elderly person is going to need at some point in their life. Every young person may need, maybe potentially at some point in their life. And again, this is not something that you want to just throw on the stock market and have a dice game with, or have some type of a stock market game. So again, all important reasons for people like me to go vote. I don't say, hey, here's my tax money to go put this on the stock market.
Absolutely. And so I mean, I think we pretty much said it all for those. So let's get to another reason: immigration. And when I say immigration, I'm not talking about an argument of whether you agree with how we allow people to immigrate, or if you just want to let people in or not let people in. I'm talking about treating people humanely. Are we cool with them putting people and kids in cages? Right now, there's still kids in cages, even though the Supreme Court ruled that they had to be let out, and there's people who are catching COVID-19. So I'm not with any type of inhumane treatment. Whether there's laws and rules that govern that I agree with or disagree with, the part of immigration I'm referring to and I'm talking about really is let's treat people humanely. Whether they've come here illegally or legally or whatever, treat them humanely. We should not have kids in cages. We should not have people in cages, especially during COVID-19. You have to find a better way. And really, honestly, if we're cool with another 4 years of this, I mean, to me, it's just wrong, period.
And when you get into, immigration, it's really cut and dry. Inhumane treatment of families and kids. I would just like for everybody to put their selves in the place of these families who have the kids in cages. Imagine if these were your kids. Nobody would like for their kids to be treated like that in such a manner where they're in cages, they're catching COVID-19. One kid, was on the news, made big headlines. He had lice once his mom came to get him. So again, really, this is just about being humane. Put yourself in these families' shoes. If you're on a foreign land, heaven forbid something happened to America and we had to go run to Mexico or Canada. And can you imagine being treated, how we're treating these immigrant families? So again, all important reasons, for individuals to vote. And again, it's a question to ask yourself, is this treatment acceptable? Put yourself in those circumstances and ask yourself, hey, this is how I want my kids to be treated if something happened to America and we had to escape to another land.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the rule of law. So the rule of law is something that Trump has talked about a lot during his campaign. He's looked at the protests, and most of which has been peaceful, but there has been looting, there has been rioting, which is wrong, and he's used that as a platform. And he talked about the rule of law and what he'll do if he's president. Well, I got news for you. He is president right now. And all these things are happening with him as president. So anybody that believes that Trump has the answers, why hasn't he already done that? Provided the answers already. Trump did. And so this is just another reason to vote, because it's just another lie. It's just like the COVID lie where said he didn't know about COVID. He absolutely knew about COVID early. And what this says is, I have the answers, me and me alone. No. We're in Trump America. If you notice, the president roots for white nationalist groups like Proud Boys, like Boogaloo. He roots for the KKK. And he said things that show that. These are good peoples. In 2017, he said about the KKK march in Virginia. And I got to tell you, when you do that, you cause more problems. So if you want to know why there's more protests, obviously the match is the shootings of unarmed black men, but he just fans the flames, and he encourages white nationalist groups to show up with guns. So if you're okay with white nationalist groups showing the guns to protest, if you're okay with somebody maybe even attacking your right to protest as an American, and this goes beyond just whether you agree with the Black Lives Matter movement or not, are you okay with somebody attacking that right? The Kyle Rittenhouse shooting in Kenosha, are you okay with police just kind of buddying with these militia groups? And are you okay with them chasing down BLM protesters but walking by Kyle Rittenhouse after he shot 3 people and killed 2 of them?
And this one, when you get into the rule of law, and this is one that I really particularly want minorities to really pay attention to, because again, things can be a little bit misleading. When you get into a lot of these protesters, the Proud Boys, Boogaloo, showing up at these rallies with guns, to protest against groups like Black Lives Matter and other civil rights groups. They're showing up with guns to be intimidating and to cause violence. And when you get into the rule of law, again, it could be misleading, because when just really getting in my history bag, when you look back at history, the last group to really protest with guns and so forth, were the Black Panthers. And I kind of remember that just from history class. And when you look at that, how when they showed up with guns, when you look at you talk about the rule of law. I kind of getting in my history bag. As soon as Black Panthers showed up, with guns protesting, immediately I have it pulled up right here. The Mulford Act of 1967 was passed, which pretty much took away, took away a lot of that, the right to bear arms in certain forms. So again, the rule of law, should be pretty standard across the board, for all groups. If the Proud Boys or Boogaloo can show up with guns with the purpose of being intimidating, with the purpose of committing violence, whatever their purpose is, again, for the President of the United States to support that in any way, again, it just begs the question. Ask yourself, is this what you're okay with if you're a minority? Is this what you're not going to vote against or vote for?
Well, I think anybody, because you could be protesting for anything. You might have a labor protest or something of that nature. And so it's not just minorities, it's everybody. Are you okay if you're white? Because you may have something to protest about a year or two from now, and you don't have the right to protest. So, I don't just want to limit it to minorities, but I think it's definitely a question minorities and people of every race, color, and creed should ask themselves. So let's talk about rule of law from a corruption standpoint. Every president has given their tax returns, opened up their tax accounts so people could see them and see that there wasn't anything suspicious there. New York is waiting for Trump to not be president so they can charge him. He only got away with his impeachment attempt because, quite frankly, the Senate supports him and allows him to do what he wants. So are you okay with a president not giving tax returns? Are you okay with a president being above the law? Or are you okay with the president firing the inspector generals before the PPP loans? And let's be clear. The inspector generals were put there after Nixon, so they were another layer of protection because Nixon did a lot of things that were corrupt and shady. And are you okay with that? Because he doesn't like the law. So that's just another thing to think about.
And when you get into the rule of law of presidents firing inspector generals, again, those inspector generals, and he fired multiple inspector generals over the years. And these inspector generals are put there to really investigate any kind of suspected crime, any kind of improprieties, whether it's from the president, whether it's from Congress. And again, just like Morial stated, after, Nixon's Watergate scandal, that's when Congress and the Senate kind of realized, hey, we have to put somebody in between us, who's supposed to be bipartial to investigate any kind of crime. So when you get into firing, inspector generals, begs the question, what are you trying to hide? What are you trying to cover up? So again, it's just a question to ask. Are you okay to allow this conduct to continue? He's the only president, to fire an inspector general really without probable. I don't think, and again, don't quote me, I don't think an inspector general has ever been fired under any presidency.
I don't know. I don't know, to be honest. I have no idea about that.
But again, when you get into just firing multiple inspector generals on your watch, just begs the question that, do we approve? Is this what we want as our president? So again, just another reason for me to go out and vote. When you get into the rule of law.
Gotcha. So let's move on to climate change. Are you okay with the wildfires going on in California right now, as well as I heard somebody on CNN this morning talking about how the ash in Colorado kept him from allowing his kids to come out. So, there's fog, and there's fog in certain places. So let's talk about this. Let's look at this. The Obama era, and some people said they didn't do enough for climate change, but they did some things. They put a lot of executive orders in place. They had the agreement with the European Union and other countries, the climate change agreement, and Trump came in and dismantled all of it. Now, Trump has not even acknowledged the wildfires in California. He's not even acknowledged. He's not even said his heart goes out to him or anything. And he's talking about leaves are dry, and it creates dry leaves on the ground creates an environment that helps the fires grow. Seriously, listen. I don't know where he got his science degree from, but I'm pretty sure you would fill out with that synopsis. So all I can say is, are you okay with climate change? Because we all have to live on the earth, regardless of you're Republican, Democrat, regardless of whether you like this policy or that policy. We all got to live here. We need to do something about this now. And I don't know how you feel about that.
I mean, and just this morning, he was in a meeting with other politicians, and he was quoted as saying, "Hey, you know what? This is going to cool off soon." And that was his quote. Things are going to cool off, and he was talking about the forest fires. And one politician shouted out, "Well, I don't think the scientists agree with that." But again, it just goes to show that how much does President Trump really even care about any kind of climate change or any kind of natural disasters like the forest fires? Just to say, hey, it's going to cool off. All important reasons to get out and vote, to make our voice heard, to make our presence felt. Again, for me, that's just not reassuring. If I'm living in California and I hear a president say, hey, things are going to cool off. For me, all of them more of a reason just to go out and vote.
So, if we move on now, let's talk about the Senate. The House, they passed the HEROES Act in May. Leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, still will not vote on it. My opinion, you're getting paid by the people. You're supposed to be for the people. There should not be a bill that's allowed to sit there for 3, 4, 5 months and not be voted on. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. Your job is to look at bills and vote on bills that pass the House or the Senate, and your job is to do that. There should be a law where it has to be done in a timely manner. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think by far, when you get into the Speaker of the House, Mitch McConnell, I think by far he's this is one of the biggest threats to American democracy. When you have a Speaker of the House who won't even bring a bill to the floor.
It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. If you're a senator, if you're a congressperson, then your job is to vote on bills, to create bills, vote on bills. That should happen. It should always happen within a timely manner, and there should be a law. It's just, that's ridiculous. So you don't even allow the democratic process to start because you won't bring the bill out. So that's just disheartening and ridiculous. And honestly, quite frankly, I don't know how it rides. But he's the leader of the House. He's the majority leader of the Senate. I'm sorry, not of the House, of the Senate. So let's move on to NATO. And this is simple. NATO, if you know the purpose of NATO, the NATO agreement was put in place to stop Russia from wreaking havoc in a war-torn and a weakened Europe, right? So U.S. went out and did that. The U.S. has always been the country that kind of counterbalances Russia. But these last 4 years, we have not counterbalanced Russia. They put bounties on our soldiers, and President Trump won't even respond. He won't even respond. So are you okay with that? I'm not okay with that.
And when you talk about his non-responsiveness to Russia, again, it kind of begs the question, one of the topics we already addressed, about his tax returns. He refuses to release these tax returns. And again, it's been much talked about, much rumored about what's potentially in there. There's been many reports about, President Trump's real estate dealings all over the world. And potentially Russia could maybe be one of those places where he has real estate businesses, real estate deals. So again, I think there's clear laws in place that prohibit that, presidents having interest in business dealings, but we're never going to know his true business dealings because nobody's seeing his tax returns.
Absolutely. And that's therein lies part of the problem. So labor laws, and this may be something you're not paying attention to because there's a lot going on in the world with COVID. There's the financial crisis where a lot of people lost their jobs, and there's racial unrest, but you need to pay attention to this. Trump has been systematically disabling the labor laws and the labor workers' rights. So one of the things, I'm just going to name a couple of things that he's done, and I can give you a website or two to check out if you don't believe me. So Trump has systematically disabled workers' rights, right? What he's done is change the rules, and I wrote them down, change the rules on management rights clauses to give employers more power to make unilateral changes and undermine collective bargaining agreements. So collective bargaining agreements are a staple of labor laws and labor rights for employees, right? And he's kind of crippled those. So he's allowed employers to undermine the bargaining process by unilaterally imposing discretionary discipline without bargaining with the union. So let me tell you this. If you look at the history of America, You look at the labor law protests, most of them are violent, and I mean extremely violent. If y'all think that y'all don't like the violence from BLM, then just look back at the history of labor protests. Look back at the history. Look at the Haymarket Affair, and look at I want to say it's called the Claremont conflict, and extremely violent bombs, guns, fire, other weapons, days long. And what you need to understand is that there's going to be more protests if you know what I mean, if we don't change something, because you're not going to have labor rights, and people in unions are going to be very frustrated, very angry, and that's going to lead to more protests. So it's just something that we need to pay attention to.
And for me, when you get into labor laws, it boils down to a few things. A lot of people, including myself, are kind of disheartened by the wages, the minimum wages that employers pay, and by President Trump weakening the labor laws, it's only going to hurt that even more. When you look at inflation just constantly going up, when you look at the prices of things going up, and labor laws being weakened, the only person that's really hurt and affected by this are the American workers. So again, it begs the question to ask yourself: Is this what we want to continue to vote for or vote against? Again, it just reinforces why voting is important, why we all need to get out and vote come November.
Absolutely. So if you look at EPI.org and just Google EPI and Google unprecedented attack on workers' rights. And matter of fact, if you Google that, pretty sure a Washington Post article will come up as well. That's going to be your best bet to find, to find information on this. If you Google it, there's plenty of information. He's been attacking these rights. Labor leaders know it, and laborers won't look the same. They may not look the same. And I just want to emphasize that when we're talking about voting, we're not just talking about the president. We're also talking about your local elections, because here's the thing: there's 3 branches of government, right? And we know the last 4 years, the Republicans have really run 2 of them. And so we know that they had the House. I'm sorry, they had the Senate. They had the House at first, but they don't have the House anymore. But they had the Senate and they have the presidency. And really, honestly, a lot of things, really, the Democrats can't do very much when you have that type of power. They cannot, and especially when you have a person like Mitch McConnell, who, as we said earlier, won't even vote on certain bills. So, do we want at least want balance, right? And balance would involve getting rid of the president, and maybe Republicans still have the Senate, maybe they don't, or maybe re-electing Trump, and maybe the Republicans get in the House, which they will be able to have a true check on Trump, which they have not had. So think about all those things before you vote, and regardless of whether you agree with me on everything or you don't agree with me or whatever, vote. And let's move on to another reason though. All right, ballooning national debt. This is simple. We're gonna, at the end of the year, we will probably be at about $1 trillion in debt. And this is, if you're a conservative, then you know that fiscal management is a big principle that you live by. But we don't have that right now.
This topic of the national debt, again, it's another one of those misleading topics. The national debt is continuing to skyrocket through the ceiling, right? And every year you hear, Republican versus Democrat about, hey, Obama's administration, they spent wasteless money, and the Democrats blame, Trump administration for this and for that. But for me, this is what it boils down to. As a taxpayer, I know where I would like my money to go and where I would not like my money to go. As a taxpayer, I don't want to give my tax money to corporate tax breaks. I don't want for millionaires and billionaires to say, hey, you know what, here's a tax cut for you, as opposed to other things. And again, these are all reasons why you should vote. As a taxpayer, again, you have to make that decision. You have to make that thought process of, hey, do you want your tax money to go to millionaires and billionaires for corporate tax breaks, payroll tax breaks? Do you want your money to go to say something like maybe healthcare for all. Because however it goes, we're going to get taxed. That's the given. We're going to get taxed. But it's just where do you want your tax money to go? And where are you okay with your tax money going? If you're okay with having billionaires, fuel their jets and their cars with your tax money, that's okay. And if you're not, then you also know where to vote as well. So again, definitely something to think about when you talk about voting and the national debt, because we all pay taxes. That's a given. We're all going to continue to pay taxes. Where do you want your money to go?
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly. And that's what it comes down to. I don't think enough people have asked that question or sought the answers.
Yeah.
They had to seek out the answers. And listen, I remember doing book reports from books. I had to go to the library. I remember getting information from books, people. But we have the internet. It's so easy to get information now. The information's out there. And let's not just look at one source, and let's make sure we're looking at reputable sources. You can say fake news all you want, but the reality is news sources like CNN, MSNBC, they're reputable sources. And you can say, oh, they're liberal or whatever, but you have to be able to distinguish between the shows that are commentary, meaning somebody's opinion, and or just news. You can look at NBC News, ABC News, and they'll give you just the news, just the facts. But you also got to look at, then people give their opinion. So if you can separate the opinion from the facts, then you're good to go, regardless of what you're looking at. If you're looking at channels that just spit out one opinion and but they're not necessarily giving you all the facts, that's going to be a problem. Sure. I don't care what the opinions are.
But in the national debt, again, it's a misleading and tricky thing because, again, we're going to pay taxes, but then we'll be led to believe, well, you know what, you can't have this entitlement program. Hey, you know what? Yeah, we gave you a stimulus check, but that's all you're going to get is one check. What do you mean that's all we're going to get is one stimulus? I've been paying taxes for a long time, but in the midst of us getting one stimulus check, guess what? Millionaires and billionaires got millions in tax relief, if not billions.
Thanks for listening. This is Politics as Usual at usualpolitics.com.